The processing script now identifies required fields that haven't been filled in and displays appropriate error messages, but there's nothing more annoying than making a mistake in one field and discovering you have to fill the whole form in again. So let's preserve user input when the form is incomplete. The processing script takes each element in the post array and reassigns it to a new variable based on the key name, so we can add some conditional logic to redisplay the value inside each input field. So let's find the first input field. It's here on line 30 and it's the name input field. We need to add a little bit of extra space before the closing angle bracket of the input element, and in there we need to have a PHP block, and inside the PHP block a conditional statement if errors, so if the errors array or the missing array contains any elements, we need to redisplay the value. So echo, and then I have a double quoted string, value equals, and then the attribute value needs to be in quotes. Rather than escaping double quotes, I'm going to have a pair of single quotes in there and then put the variable between them. So it's the name field that we're looking for, so it's name. Now before editing the other input elements, I think it would be a good idea to save this and test it in a browser. So here's our form, and let's say that Conan O'Brien wants to get in touch. And if we click send comments, the value has been preserved but it's truncated. We've got only Conan O. To understand why, right click, view page source, and the opening single quote here has been matched with the apostrophe, which is the same as a single quote. So Brian is completely ignored. And even if I'd escaped double quotes, the same problem would arise with text input that contains double quotes. So before displaying unfiltered user input, we need to pass it to a PHP function called HTML entities, which converts certain characters into their equivalent HTML character entity. So let's just close that, go back to the editing program, and instead of double quotes here, I'm going to use a single quote and then an opening double quote which will be wrapped around the value. Then we need a concatenation operator and then pass name to the HTML entities function. Then another concatenation operator, and this will be the closing double quote. We just need a single quote there to finish off the code. That looks fine. So we're going to be passing the name variable to HTML entities, and then we'll be wrapping it in double quotes. So if we save that, go back to the browser and reload the page. Let's see if Conan can get in touch again this time. Send comments, and yes, everything has been preserved correctly this time. If we right click and view the page source, we can see that we've got double quotes on both sides and that the single quote or the apostrophe has been correctly preserved. So by default, a single quote or an apostrophe won't be affected by the HTML entities function. But let's see what happens when we use double quotes. So just close that for the moment, and let's imagine that Elvis wants to get in touch from the beyond. And if we click send comments, the value has been preserved. If we right click and view page source, this time the double quotes inside the string have been converted into their HTML character entity. So that's working fine. What about accented characters? Let's just close that. And we seem to be attracting a lot of celebrities. Let's see what happens if the top French singer-songwriter Grégoire tries to get in touch. A QT in Grégoire. And if we click send comments, it's preserved. If we right click and view the page source, it has been converted into its HTML entity equivalent, so eAcute. This should work fine as long as you're using PHP 5.4 or later. Earlier versions of PHP would corrupt accented characters, but that no longer happens since PHP 5.4. So let's just close that and go back to our editing program, and we can copy this PHP code on lines 31 to 35, and then we can add that in the same position to our next input element, email, and then all we need to do is to change the name of the variable. Instead of name, it is email. And the last input field is a text area. Text areas don't have a value attribute, so they need a slightly different way of approaching this. What we need to do is directly between the opening and closing tags of the text area is to put in a PHP block. And it's extremely important that the opening and closing PHP tags should be right up against the opening and closing text area tags. If you don't do that, you'll get unwanted blank space in the text area. But inside the PHP tags, we can add as much white space as we want to work with. So we'll have if errors or missing, and we don't need a value attribute, we just need to echo HTML entities and then the variable. In this case, it's comments. So we can now save the page, go back to the browser, let's reload it. So let's test it. Just going to use my own name and then email. And then I'm going to leave out comments because that's a required field. So if we click that, it says please fix the items indicated. I forgot to add any comments, but my name and the email have been preserved. And just to prove that I'm not cheating, let's just get rid of my name and then have a comment in there and click send comments, and this time it's preserved the comments, but it's asked me to enter my name. So that's how you preserve user input when a form is submitted with errors. Before redisplaying the values passed through the post array, you need to pass them to the HTML entities function, which converts many non-alphanumeric characters to their equivalent HTML character entities. By default, single quotes are left unchanged, but double quotes are converted. In PHP 5.4 and 5.5, the function defaults to UTF-8 encoding, making it safe for accented characters and languages that use non-alphabetic scripts, such as Japanese and Chinese. In PHP 5.6 and later, HTML entities uses the server's default character set, but unless it's changed explicitly, that's also UTF-8.